Hello and welcome to my channel. This is Creepy Dread, your storyteller of choice. Today I want to share with you several disturbing and scary Reddit stories. From a woman whose identity is stolen, to an overpoweringly sweet smell off the beaten track in the woods, and the dark side of social media. Which of the stories is your favorite? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It would help me a lot. Thanks. Enough talk, and let's dive in. I wish you a good night. It all started on a Friday night in late September, just as the leaves were starting to turn. I was a college sophomore, living off campus in a quiet neighborhood. Most of the other students were partying that night, but I had decided to stay in and catch up on some reading. My apartment was on the ground floor of a 3-story building, nestled between two much taller buildings that blocked most of the light from the street lamps. It was a cozy place, just a small living room, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom, and my bedroom. I liked it because it was quiet and felt like a little hideaway from the world. That night, I was curled up on the couch with a novel when I heard a faint tapping noise. At first, I thought it was just the wind rustling the branches of the old oak tree outside. But then it happened again. A distinct, deliberate tap, tap, tap on the glass of my living room window. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Maybe a bird had flown into the window. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Summoning my courage, I got up and walked slowly to the window. I peeked through the curtains, expecting to see nothing but the dark, empty street. Instead, I saw him, a man standing just outside the window, his face partially obscured by the shadows. He was tall and thin, with unkempt hair that fell over his eyes. He wore a faded hoodie and jeans that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. His eyes were locked onto mine, and his lips were curled into a chilling smile. My stomach dropped, and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the coffee table. I wanted to scream, but my voice was stuck in my throat. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons. 911, what's your emergency? The operator asked, her voice calm and steady. There's a man outside my window, I whispered, terrified he might hear me. Can you describe him? She asked. I gave her a quick description, my voice trembling. She assured me that officers were on their way and told me to stay on the line. I hung up the phone and glanced back at the window. The man was still there, his eyes never leaving mine. He pressed his hand against the glass, as if testing to see if he could get inside. The minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive. I huddled on the floor trying to stay out of sight, my heart racing with fear. Finally, I heard the wail of sirens approaching. Red and blue lights flashed outside, and I heard the sound of car doors slamming. I peeked out the window and saw 2 police officers approaching the man. They shone their flashlights in his face, and for a moment, he seemed to snap out of whatever trance he was in. He turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness between the buildings. The officers chased after him, but he was too quick. They returned a few minutes later, empty-handed, but they assured me they would keep an eye out for him. After they left, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I kept checking the windows and doors, making sure everything was locked tight. I barely slept that night, jumping at every sound. The next morning, I called my landlord and asked if we could install security cameras around the building. He agreed, and within a few days, I had a state-of-the-art security system in place. But even with the cameras, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I walked home from class, I felt eyes on me, and every time I heard a noise outside, I was convinced it was him, coming back to finish what he'd started. I started taking different routes to and from school, constantly looking over my shoulder. One evening, about a week after the incident, I found a note slipped under my door. It was written in a messy scrawl, and my blood ran cold as I read it. You looked so pretty last night. I can't wait to see you again. I called the police, but there was little they could do without any real evidence. They advised me to be cautious and to report any further incidents immediately. Terrified, I decided to stay with a friend for a while. I didn't want to be alone, not with that creep still out there somewhere. My friend lived in a large apartment building with a doorman and security cameras everywhere. I felt safer there, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. A few weeks later, I moved to a new apartment in a different part of town. It was a bit more expensive, but it had better security, and I needed to feel safe again. I didn't tell many people where I was moving, just in case. It's been a year since that night, and I still get chills every time I think about it. I'm more cautious now, always making sure my doors and windows are locked, and I'm always aware of my surroundings. I never saw the man again, but sometimes I still feel like I'm being watched, like he's out there somewhere, waiting for the right moment to strike. I just hope that moment never comes. Remember, sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we can't see. Stay safe out there. About 2 years ago, I found myself driving home late at night after a family reunion. It was a long drive, around 2 hours on roads flanked by thick, suffocating bushes and trees. The kind of roads that could easily be a setting for a horror movie. I had to get back for work the next day, so I didn't stay overnight. And as the night wore on, the exhaustion started to hit me hard. You know that feeling when suddenly you're hit with an overwhelming wave of sleepiness, like someone flipped a switch? That's exactly what happened to me. My eyes were drooping, and no matter how much I tried to shake it off, I knew I couldn't keep driving safely. But finding a place to pull over felt impossible. The road was empty, and every inch of it was shrouded in darkness and dense vegetation. So in a desperate move, I decided to pull over to the side of the road onto the grass, hidden behind some bushes. I made a mental note of the time, 11:22 p.m., before drifting off into a fitful sleep. The car's engine was off, and the world outside was a shadowy blur. I was jolted awake by a scratching sound against the car. I glanced at the clock, 11:50 p.m. The noise stopped after a few seconds, and despite the growing sense of unease, I was so exhausted that I simply turned over and tried to get back to sleep. But the scratching sound returned, and this time it didn't stop. I looked at the clock again, 12:40 a.m. My heart started racing. Why would an animal return after almost an hour? I peered in the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of something darting away into the forest. That moment, I couldn't shake the image of the hook killer from the urban legend. You know the one. Scratches on the car, killer lurking nearby. I was out of there faster than you could say nightmare. I sped down the road, desperate to put as much distance between me and whatever was out there. Just around a bend, I saw a car parked off to the side with the driver's side door open. I slowed down to take a look, and to my relief, there was no one inside. But as I looked back in my rearview mirror, that's when things took a turn for the worse. Out of nowhere, a man came sprinting around the corner, waving his arms and screaming, Hey you, get the fuck out of your car, now." His voice was frantic, almost guttural. My heart pounded in my chest as I floored the accelerator and sped off into the night. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. My mind was racing, a maelstrom of fear and adrenaline. I sped through the darkness, my eyes straining against the heavy night. The road seemed endless, each shadow and curve amplifying my dread. I was determined to put as much distance between myself and that terrifying encounter as I could. The next few miles were a blur. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights following me or the shadowy figure from before. But nothing. The road behind me was clear, though the feeling of being watched never left. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and I could feel sweat trickling down my back. I tried to focus on the road ahead, desperate for any sign of civilization. Eventually, I came to a small gas station with a few flickering lights. The neon sign outside buzzed weakly, casting an eerie glow over the empty parking lot. I pulled in, the tires crunching over the gravel. My heart was still racing, but I was finally able to catch my breath. I figured I'd take a moment to calm down and gather my thoughts before continuing the drive. I got out of the car, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. I walked over to the gas station store, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. The place was deserted, but I didn't mind. I just wanted to buy a cup of coffee and a moment of peace. As I waited for the cashier, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I glanced around the store. my eyes darting from shelf to shelf. That's when I noticed something strange. There was a stack of newspapers on the counter, and one of the headlines caught my eye. It read, "Local man missing, last seen driving late at night." Felt a chill run down my spine as I saw a photo of the missing person. He looked strikingly similar to the man who had screamed at me. My mind raced, trying to piece together the unsettling connection. I bought the coffee and hurried back to my car. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. As I was about to drive away, I noticed something else. My side mirror was cracked. It was a small detail, but in that moment, it felt like a sinister omen. I tried to push the thought from my mind and focused on getting home. The drive from the gas station was unnervingly quiet. I kept expecting something to happen, but nothing did. I finally pulled into my driveway just as dawn was breaking. Exhausted and frazzled, I went inside and collapsed into bed, but sleep didn't come easily. My dreams were plagued by shadows and screams, and I woke up several times, heart pounding. I spent the next few days on edge, constantly checking over my shoulder and avoiding late-night drives. I kept thinking about that newspaper headline and what it meant. Was the man I saw connected to the missing person? Was he trying to warn me, or was he something far more sinister? I decided to dig deeper into the case. I found out that the missing man was indeed last seen on the same stretch of road. The investigation had turned up little, and the case was still open. I also learned that several other people had reported strange encounters in that area. Scratching sounds, odd figures in the woods, and unsettling messages. It seemed I wasn't the only one who had experienced something terrifying there. Now, whenever I drive late at night, I'm always cautious, especially on isolated roads. I can't shake the feeling that there's something in those woods, something that watches and waits. Maybe it's just my imagination running wild, or maybe there's something darker lurking in the shadows. Either way, the fear of that night still lingers. So, if you ever find yourself on a deserted road late at night, remember my story. Trust your instincts, stay alert, and never let your guard down. Sometimes, things that go bump in the night are more than just the stuff of nightmares. I've been a social media influencer for a few years now. It's been a fun and exciting journey, sharing my life and connecting with thousands of people worldwide. But a few months ago, something happened that made me wish I'd never started this whole thing. It started with an innocent-looking comment on one of my Instagram photos. It was a picture of me at a local coffee shop, smiling over a latte. One of the comments stood out from the usual mix of hearts and compliments. "Hope you enjoyed your vanilla latte. Did you know they put extra syrup in it just for you?" That might sound harmless, but the thing is, I never mentioned what kind of drink I had. I brushed it off, thinking it was just a lucky guess from someone who knew me well. Then, the messages started. First, they were friendly, like a fan trying to strike up a conversation. "I saw you at the park yesterday. Loved your outfit." Again, I hadn't posted anything about being at the park. My stomach churned with unease, but I told myself it was just a coincidence. I mean, I did go to the park a lot, and it wasn't unusual for fans to spot me in public. But then the messages became more specific, more invasive. "How's your cat feeling? She seemed a bit under the weather yesterday." I had never posted about my cat being sick. That's when I started to panic. Someone was watching me, following me closely enough to know these intimate details. I decided to do some digging, trying to find out more about the account sending these messages. It was a fan account, filled with pictures of me, some of which I'd never seen before. They were taken from strange angles, almost like someone had been hiding while snapping them. I blocked the account, hoping that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. A few days later, a new account popped up with a direct message. "Why did you block me? I'm just trying to be friends." Attached was a photo of me inside my house, sitting on the couch. My heart skipped a beat. I felt sick. No one else was home, and this picture was taken from outside, through the living room window. I called the police, but they couldn't do much. They advised me to keep my doors and windows locked and to be careful about what I posted online. I hired a security company to install cameras around my house, hoping it would deter whoever was doing this. But things got worse. I woke up one morning to find a note slipped under my door. You looked so peaceful last night. I watched you sleep. I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend across town. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my closest friends, but somehow the messages continued. Nice change of scenery. Hope you're feeling safer. That was when it hit me. Whoever this was, they weren't just following me. They were inside my accounts, monitoring everything I did. My phone, my laptop, even my smartwatch. I was being tracked. I went to a tech-savvy friend for help, and they confirmed my worst fears. My accounts had been hacked. The stalker had access to my location, my messages, everything. We spent hours going through every device, scrubbing them clean, changing passwords, and setting up new security measures. But the damage was already done. I felt violated, my privacy shattered. I decided to take a break from social media, deleting all my accounts. The messages stopped, and I finally started to feel a little safer. After a lot of work, my friend and I managed to clean my devices and set up a strong new security system. I finally felt like I had a little control back. For a while, things were quiet. The messages stopped, and I felt a bit more at ease. But the fear was still there, lingering in the back of my mind. Every time I walked past a window or heard an unexpected noise, my heart would race. One evening, I was sitting on the couch when I noticed a flashing light outside. I peeked through the curtains and saw the police pulling up to the house across the street. A few moments later, I received a text from my neighbor. They got him. The guy who's been stalking you. He was hiding out in the abandoned house 2 blocks over. My heart skipped a beat as relief washed over me. I couldn't believe it. They had actually caught him. The police told me that he had been using stolen equipment from a nearby tech company to hack into people's devices. He had been following me for months, using my own technology against me. Knowing he was in custody brought a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. It would take time to feel completely safe again, but at least now I could start rebuilding my life without the constant fear of being watched. I eventually returned to social media, but this time I was much more cautious. I never let my guard down again. Technology can be a double-edged sword. Stay vigilant and take steps to protect your privacy. A few years ago, I decided to take a walk through a part of the woods I'd never explored before. It was the kind of path you'd only find if you wandered off the beaten track, where the trees were thicker and the shadows seemed to swallow any hint of sunlight. The air was filled with the usual earthy scents of decay and moss. But then, something strange happened. I caught a whiff of something overpoweringly sweet, a smell so sickly and cloying that it almost made my stomach churn. It was as if someone had spilled an entire vat of syrup in the middle of the forest. Naturally, my curiosity got the better of me. I pushed aside the undergrowth, and there, hidden beneath a tangle of branches, was a sight I'll never forget. The body was barely recognizable. It had clearly been there for weeks, maybe even months. The flesh was bloated and discolored, a grotesque mix of green and black. It was swollen, with various grotesque fluids seeping out. The local wildlife had made quite a feast of it, leaving behind a macabre scene of nature's cruelty. I did the responsible thing and called the police. They instructed me to stay with the body until they arrived. It was in the middle of nowhere, so I had a long wait ahead of me. As the daylight faded, I was left alone with the corpse, enveloped in the encroaching darkness. The woods grew silent, save for the occasional rustling of leaves and distant cries of nocturnal creatures. The darkness seemed to press in on me, and time felt like it was dragging. The air grew colder, heavier, and there I was, sitting there, just a few feet away from the decaying body. The night was filled with a palpable sense of dread. I kept expecting something, or someone, to emerge from the shadows. When the police finally arrived, they confirmed what I had feared. The man had committed suicide. It was a tragic end to a tragic life. But for me, that was not the end of the story. The real horror began after that night. For weeks after, I was plagued by nightmares. In my dreams, the man's face would emerge from the darkness, twisted in anger. He would speak to me, not with words, but with a forceful presence that screamed of rage and bitterness. His ghostly figure would accuse me of disturbing his final rest, of intruding upon his chosen end. In these dreams, his message was always the same. He wanted me to suffer, to end my own life. It was relentless, haunting me at every turn. Even though I knew it was just my imagination running wild, the intensity of the nightmares made them feel all too real. Tonight, as I type this out, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there. Maybe he's watching, waiting to slip back into my dreams and remind me of that awful night. It's a disturbing thought, knowing that a piece of that darkness still lingers in my mind. Sometimes I wonder if we disturb the dead, or if they disturb us. I suppose some mysteries are better left buried, and some horrors are best left in the shadows, where they belong. At the start of a new week, I noticed a new girl at the office. Her name was Lily, and she seemed friendly enough at first. She was hired as an assistant to the executive team, so we didn't work directly together, but we often crossed paths in the break room or at meetings. At first, I didn't think much of her. She seemed to fit in well with the office crowd, always smiling and eager to help. But soon I started noticing some strange things. One Monday, I walked into the office and noticed Lily wearing the same dress I'd worn the previous week. I shrugged it off. After all, it was a popular brand, and maybe she just liked the style. But then it happened again and again, each time she wore an outfit that I had recently worn. At first, I thought it was just a weird coincidence, but then it started getting more personal. Lily began styling her hair just like mine, cutting it the same length and even using the same color. It was eerie, like she was trying to become my mirror image. My friends at work started joking about it, calling her Little Lucy, but to me, it wasn't funny. It was unnerving. I tried to talk to her about it, but she just laughed it off, saying I was being silly. Then I noticed she had started using the same perfume as me. Same brand, the same scent, my signature scent. Everywhere I went, there was Lily, leaving a trail of my perfume behind her. I began to feel uneasy. It was like she was trying to step into my skin, to erase my existence and replace me with herself. I tried to talk to my boss about it, but he just brushed it off, saying she probably just looked up to me. Things got worse. One morning, I walked into my office to find Lily sitting at my desk typing away on my computer. When I confronted her, she apologized and said she was just trying to help with some of my workload. I told her firmly to stay out of my space, but she didn't. The next day, I found a photo of her on my desk. It was a selfie she had taken in my office, sitting in my chair, with my nameplate in the foreground. She had left a note that simply read, "I look good here, don't I?" That was the last straw. I took the photo to HR and filed a complaint. They promised to look into it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. That night, I received a message on my personal phone. It was a video clip sent from an unknown number. The video showed me sitting at my desk, typing away. My heart pounded in my chest. How did she get my personal number? How long had she been watching me? I was terrified. I went to the police, but without any concrete evidence of a threat, there was little they could do. I decided to take a few days off work, hoping that some distance would make things better. But Lily wasn't done with me yet. The next morning, I woke up to find my car missing from the driveway. I called the police, and they found it parked outside Lily's apartment. My personal belongings scattered inside. She had taken my life and was now living it for herself. That was when I knew I had to take drastic action. I started documenting everything, every incident, every creepy encounter, every note and message. I set up cameras in my home and in my office to catch her in the act. Finally, one night, I got the evidence I needed. Cameras in my house caught her sneaking in, rifling through my closet and trying on my clothes. She even stood in front of my mirror, mimicking my expressions and gestures. Armed with the footage, I went back to the police and to HR. This time, they took me seriously. Lily was fired and arrested for stalking and harassment. I thought it was over, but the experience left a lasting scar. I moved to a new city, changed my phone number, and tried to rebuild my life. Even now, I'm still haunted by what happened. I'm always looking over my shoulder, always wondering if she's out there, watching, waiting for another chance to take over my life. Thanks for listening to my story.